This is the Landlording for Life podcast, where landlords explore their success and stories of failure while building a foundation to improve upon. Here's your host, Sean Morrissey.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Landlording for Life podcast for this week. This is your host, Sean Morrissey, and as always, thanks so much for tuning in. Now, today's episode is going to be a little bit different in that we're going to interview myself, as I've had some feedback over the past few weeks from folks saying, hey, Sean, who are you? What are you all about? Are you a real estate investor? Do you have anything to do with real estate, or are you just simply a podcaster? Well, I'm going to go into that in a little more detail. But before we do that, we'd like to thank today's sponsor, Audible.com. Audible.com has over 180,000 titles on their website. You can download those similar to you do with your podcast and listen to them on your phone or your desktop. And we're going to give you a free 30-day trial by going to audibletrial.com/landlording. And there you can register on audible.com, get your 30-day trial through our special link, and download all sorts of cool books to assist you in building your real estate education. So onward and upward, we're going to go on to today's interview. So as I stated, over the past few weeks, we've had some requests from listeners saying, hey, Sean, who are you? What are you all about? Are you even an investor, much less somebody who's just not somebody who's just a podcaster, frankly. So I wanted to go in a little bit of detail on my background today, who I am, how I got to podcast in a show here called Landlording for Life, and hopefully assist some of you listeners that might be at the entry-level phase of your landlording career in regards to scaling up. So first and foremost, I wanted to cover this question. Who am I? So Sean Morrissey, I am now the father of two children here in the western suburbs of the Chicagoland area, and I've been an investor since June of 2003. In fact, I'd probably say my career started somewhere in the summer of 2001 when I initially sat down with my father, took me to dinner one night and said, hey, Sean, I know you've got your W-2 job. And, at that point I was getting started in restaurants. And he said, do you know the tax advantages of investment real estate? And naturally, I had no idea. I mean, at that time, I was in my early 20s, figured that you just worked hard and you collected a salary and you stockpiled away your 401k and you kept doing that week in, week out. And sure enough, after sitting down and that short conversation and understanding that by investing in real estate, or in essence, buy and hold real estate, you could write off your property taxes, you could write off your mortgage interest. I mean, there was all sorts of advantages, right? That many of you are aware of this day and age. So I started reading books. And I got involved in different real estate investment clubs, be it our local, real estate RIAs here in the Chicagoland area. I ended up, being on the board of one for a couple of years, and I really started to educate myself to a point where in June of 2003, I bought my first rental property. It was just a 2-bedroom, 1-bath quad unit. Right off, an entrance to an expressway. So it had a great location. I checked that box. It didn't need a whole lot of work because I didn't have a whole lot of cash to really set aside to basically do a fixer-upper. So I was able to check that box, and it cash flowed. It didn't cash flow much. I mean, I'll tell you what, it probably cash flowed about $100 a month, which in retrospect was a huge mistake. And it's not like I used what we'd call this day and age the Burr method. Basically, I was just trying to look to get a foot in the door to say, hey, I'm a landlord. I'm going to start renting a property to somebody, and I'm going to start getting experience with the pros and cons of landlording and see how it goes. Well, sure enough, I'd say it took me about 45 days to get that property rented and, fair market value. And I ended up putting in a new furnace before that tenant moved in. And the first tenant she was okay. I mean, she was very particular, right? She knew what she wanted. She knew what she wanted me to fix and the whole bit. And at the end of the day, worked out great. Now, a few years into that property, I had a tenant file bankruptcy halfway through a lease when she stopped paying rent. And I was told at that point, Sean, you could be in for big trouble, because when somebody files for bankruptcy in the middle of a lease, they could basically not pay you rent and you cannot evict them for a certain time period until that bankruptcy's discharged. But that's a whole other story. And then I had to do my first eviction a year or two after that. Well, from 03 to 07, I basically purchased 3 rental properties. And then I bought one in 08. And you kind of see where this is going, right? Like, oh boy, Sean bought his first couple properties really at the height of the market. And sure enough, that was the case. And it kind of set me back, from 08, 09, 2010, 2011. The banks were tight. My numbers were tight. Banks said, you're not worth lending to, and we're not lending to anybody anyways. So come 2013, I was at that point a real estate broker. Let's see. I opened up my own office in 2011, October of 2011, Chicagoland Realty Group Partners. And at that point, we managed about 85 properties. In fact, if it wasn't for landlording, I never would have gotten into property management. So I thank, not only my father and those local RIAs, but just taking that action evolved into a whole new career path for me. And it was very lucrative at that time, because at that time, there were so many folks that were underwater on their mortgage, right? And they couldn't sell their home. They couldn't give it away to their brother. And they'd come to us and say, hey, Sean, can this property cash flow? And given the fact that there were so many folks out of their home, so many folks displaced from home ownership, that it left this huge tenant pool of not only very well-qualified tenants, because there are folks who used to be homeowners, but there was just such a supply for rentals that we're still feeling it to this day in the Chicagoland area. So we ultimately ended up renting homes that evolved into property management in 2010. 2011, I opened up my own brokerage. And by 2013, I was back on track to buy another rental property. So it was another condo, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And if you ask me, hey, Sean, why do you like condos so much? Well, the reason's very simple. We're responsible from everything from the drywall in, right? So I don't have to worry about roofs. Sometimes have to worry about windows. Don't have to worry about exterior maintenance, snow removal, those types of items. Now, the advantages there are in the expenses, but the disadvantage there is that you have no control over the health of that association. So not to go off on too much of a tangent here, but that's a valuable point I want to send to everybody, that if you are to invest in condominium projects, you're going to want to look at the health of the association and get their books and take a look at those books and say, all right, how delinquent is this association on a regular basis? Is it more than 10% of what they collect every month? Let's see. I mean, are they paying vendors on time? Do they have a management company in place that that has a good reputation? And, just what does common sense tell you? I mean, looking at the grounds, how in shape are those grounds? Are they actually being cared for and whatnot? So to get back to my timeline there, 2013 bought a property, 2014 bought a few more, and by the end of 2015, I basically was up to 9 rental properties. Now, I reached a point where, at that point, even portfolio residential lenders were saying, you know what, Sean, I don't think we want to lend to you because you are at the threshold of 10 properties. So I had to figure a way around that, and that's a common concern for most folks, right? First, you got to overcome the 4 properties, right? That can be non-owner occupied. Then you got to overcome the 10 properties that Fannie and Freddie will give you. And then you kind of evolve into learning, my goodness, there's a whole new world out there, and it's called commercial lending. So in 2016, I bought a portfolio of 9 homes, nine townhomes, all owned by the same individual in an LLC. And I financed that with commercial lending. And for those of you that are at that threshold looking to get out, I mean, feel free to respond to this podcast. Leave us some message, shoot me a message, and I'll be happy to give you a referral or two for those that can assist in the world of commercial lending. But that's the next step of scalability for me, was understanding the world of commercial lending. Now, since then, I've bought 31 units in the course of 2 years. So I'm now up to 40 units, 25 properties in my portfolio. And having said all that, the major breaking point for me was understanding the world of commercial lending. So, recently, just in the past couple months, purchased a 16-unit building. I've gone to some sheriff sales, bought some properties in cash, and then refinanced them to get ideally a 50 to 70% LTV and get some cash back in my pocket after those purchases. And I'm up to 40. Now, having said all that, you may say, all right, Sean, well, you've been doing this for 15 years now. Are you truly financially free? Is that why you're doing a podcast? You're looking for stuff to do in your free time. So, at the end of the day, why did I choose real estate investment? And this goes back to, early 2001, right? When I was just learning the tax advantages. And as you get into this business deeper and deeper, you realize that there's 4 ways in which a real estate investment builds wealth. And if you look at other investments, there's typically 1 way, maybe 2 ways, but there's not 4 ways. And that's why the real estate investment is so popular and so powerful, frankly. So here are the 4 ways. And this is something to write down, hang up on your wall and look at it every day. And then look at what you're doing on a daily basis and say, is my job providing me these ways of wealth? And I can tell you, sir or ma'am, that it is not. So here are the 4 ways. Number 1, a real estate investment, be it a buy and hold investment, and this is what I'm referring to, buy and hold investment real estate, provides you the means to pay down principal over time. Now, when you look at your mortgage statement every month, unless you've got an interest-only payment, you are paying down principal. And based on your amortization schedule, be it 20 years or 25 years or 30 years on a residential, that principal is going to become a bigger and bigger part of that payment over the years. So take myself, for instance, right? 40 units. Every month, someone's paying rent to our LLC and, in essence, paying down our principal. Now, you may say, hey, Sean, well, how much principal pay down can I expect? And, for us right now, it's anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000 a month. I don't have the firm figure for the April 2018 when we recorded this, but it's somewhere in the ballpark of $5,000 to $6,000 a month just by having a mortgage in our name. So that's net worth, right? I'm adding net worth month to month just by collecting a rental payment. That's awesome stuff. Way number 2 is appreciation, right? So those that might be fix and flippers out there, you may say, hey, Sean, well, I don't have the principal pay down because I'm flipping a property. And that's right. That's correct. And that stinks for you. But you do have that speculative appreciation, right? As a fix and flipper, you're going to buy a property for X, you're going to put Y into it, you're going to ideally sell it for Z, and you've got that appreciative value, which you hope is going to be a huge chunk. Well, for us buy and hold investors, while is unsexy and as boring as buy and hold investing may be, at the end of the day, that appreciative value is the cherry on top of everything we do. So we may hold the property for 5 years, 10 years, 20, 40 years. You may carry it till death, right? At the end of the day, that property is ideally going to naturally appreciate so long as you're sensitive to the market in which you're investing in. And while I never invest for appreciation, I always invest for cash flow, right? And there's plenty of podcasts out there now that teach that mantra. That appreciative value will occur over time. I don't want to say it's guaranteed, but the chances of it not happening are incredibly slim. So that's way number 2. Now, way number 3 is something I already talked about, and that's the tax advantages of owning buy and hold real estate. And even after our latest tax reform this past year, by President Trump and company, those tax advantages still exist. So I'm not going to go into detail in regards to tax advantages. I kind of mentioned, mortgage interest, the property taxes, association dues, property management fees, leasing fees. Naturally, you always want to consult your accountant, the professional, when it comes to what can I write off. But at the end of the day, that Schedule E income, or that Schedule income loss after depreciation typically, is going to hit your 1040. It's going to bring down your adjusted gross income. You're going to end up paying less tax over time. But again, consult your accountant and before moving forward. I'll just leave it at that. And then way number 4 is something I've taken advantage of since 2003, and that's rental cash flows. So for those of you out there that say, I don't want to be a landlord, it sounds awful, property management sounds scary. What if I have to evict somebody? What if they burn down my house? What if they have 20 pets? There's systems in place you can put that will prevent these things from happening. And experience will teach you everything you need to know about working with people. Picking the brains of others that have been landlords for years is always highly advantageous when it comes to setting up those systems. But at the end of the day, way number 4, in which buy and hold real estate creates wealth, is through those rental cash flows. And as you scale up and those rental cash flows increase over time, those will also provide you that exit to what we would consider to be true financial freedom. So, moving forward, as I scale my portfolio, these four means of real estate investment wealth increase more and more. I mean, they scale more and more. And really what it falls back on me to do is have the systems in place to be able to scale up from 5 units to 10 units to 20 units to 40 units. And our goal at the end of this year is to have 60 units. And when we hit 60 units, based on the cash flow generated and the expenses that I anticipate that come through that, be it, we have property management software in place, inspection software in place, a small payroll. After those expenses, I believe I will have hit a point in which I can obtain what's called true financial freedom. And you may say, all right, Sean, I hear that term tossed around a lot, right? Like financial freedom, be financially free. What does that mean, right? And I believe, while everyone has a concept of what it means, you've got to sit down and write down what does it mean to you, right? So you may be happy in what you do for a living, right? You may have a W-2 job and you may say, hey, Sean, I am most happy where I'm at. I don't need to be financially free. And that makes sense. I mean, that I can't disagree with you there when it comes to how you spend your time. But that's what it comes down to, right? It's how you spend your time, to me, is a direct correlation of financial freedom. So here's what I wrote down. Financial freedom is having the ability to control your time, decisions, and what you do on a day-to-day basis. So if that means me waking up and taking my kids to school and taking my time with my coffee and reading the paper and enjoying the day, there you go. If it means taking clients out and showing them homes and maybe listing a property or two and selling those over the course of a few months, that's fine too. At the end of the day, it's having the freedom to choose and being able to do that because you have your finances in place to such a point to where you have the ability to control your time and what you do on a day-to-day basis. So if that's something you're seeking, then hopefully this podcast will help you. And hopefully the podcast we've set up in the past and here in the future will help you as well. Because our goal at the end of the day with this podcast is really to assist those entry-level landlords or those of you that are thinking about getting into buy and hold real estate investment and taking it to the next level. Scaling up, saying, hey, I don't have the systems in place to get from 10 to 15 properties. What do I have to do? And, maybe you listen back to our 1031 exchange episode or, our multifamily financing episode. And you say, all right, well, I've got some ideas there. I can now take a step back and incorporate that into what I'm doing and make it happen. So that's really our goal here, is not to sell you as the listener anything, not to have the podcast necessarily make our company any money, frankly. It's to educate you as the consumer as a way of giving back. And I'm hoping our podcast provides all that. Having said all of that, you need to ask yourself, what is my big why, right? And I'm sure many of you have heard this before. What is your big why? And I think the best way to do that is to take a step back, complete silence, maybe some music in the background, depending on your fancy, and start to write down those things that are important to you in your life. For me, that's family. That's having the ability to decide what I want to do on a day-to-day basis. It's having the ability to give back. It's having the ability to build something, be it a business, and see how those goals or those wants incorporate into a big why. And the more I've done this over time, and I'm talking 10 years of trying to go back and refresh myself on, what is a big why to begin with? What is my big why? It really all comes down to time. We all have an undefined amount of time on this earth, and at the end of the day, we need to decide how we spend those minutes, those seconds, in a way that suits your needs. And for me personally, it's to leave a legacy to my family and to my loved ones and to myself. And I find buy and hold real estate investment to be the best means to do so. And again, that all falls back to the four means in which you build wealth in real estate. And hopefully those all continue moving forward, right? But at the end of the day, that's my big why. Now, having said all that, for those of you that have been loyal listeners, you've probably realized over the course of our episodes here that we ask each of our interviewees 3 questions, and I'm going to answer those questions myself on this podcast today. So first and foremost, one of the questions we ask is, what is a book that you have read lately that ultimately could supply value to our listeners? And the book I'm going to recommend today is called The Value of Debt, right? It's called The Value of Debt. And for those of you Audible subscribers, you can actually download it as an Audible book, or again, audibletrial.com/landlording, and you can download it with your 30-day free trial. So The Value of Debt is a great book because I think what gets a little confusing from most folks that listen to podcasts, or, those folks that may be, let's just say Dave Ramsey followers, right? With the mantra of pay off all debt, is that this book does a great job at defining what is considered good debt, what is considered bad debt, and where should you put your investment dollar to get the most out of it. And based on the podcast I've listened to, where I see it from either angle, either over leveraging yourself in debt or way under leveraging yourself in debt, this book will give you a good sense of where you should put that dollar based on whether it's good or bad debt. So check it out, Value of Debt. Next question. What is the one piece of advice that we would supply listeners, or in this case, myself? What is the one piece of advice I should give all of you out there based on my years of buy and hold real estate investment? And that today would be to make sure you have the systems in place before you scale, okay? I could say a bunch of other things, right? Get started, or, save your money before you buy a property, or, something of that nature. Those things all become a little cliche. The reason I say get systems in place before you scale is because I would say it's likely one of those top 5 things that I would wish upon myself when I was 25 years old and wanting to get started, because having the systems in place, having the people that put strengths to your weaknesses will help you scale quicker, more efficiently, with less headaches than if you were to just jump in tomorrow and buy a 70-unit property, right? So every once in a while, I'll listen to a success story like that. Like, well, tell us about your first purchase. Well, I bought 75 properties in Memphis, and then I'm just like, boy, where are they going to be 5 years from now when they realize evictions happen and repairs happen and there's all sorts of things that can go wrong, right? And I'm not trying to be the pessimist here, but at the end of the day, having the appropriate systems in place before you buy that 75-unit property is required. And it's not to discount those folks either, because they may have very well have had those systems in place. But just get your systems in place. Talk to those folks that have been there, done that. Ask them what they've done. They'll give you the reasoning as to why they did it, and then you can decide whether you want to incorporate that into your lifestyle before moving forward. And then lastly, the last question we ask everybody is, what is the best way for listeners to contact you? So many of you have found us on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, and those are all fantastic resources. And naturally, if you have the ability to leave us a 5-star review, any review would be highly appreciated. But our website is chicago-realty-group.com. Now, through that website, you can see our Chicagoland MLS. You can talk to us about property management, listen to the podcast naturally, talk about multifamily investment, the whole bit. But if you wish to contact me directly, you can shoot me an email, and that's going to be at Sean, SEAN, Morrissey, MORRISSEY @gmail.com. And again, off our website, you can fill out an inquiry form as well and just explain the reason as to why you've inquired, and I'll be happy to follow up with you as well. So, having said all that, I hope this episode today has provided everybody the opportunity to get a better understanding of who I am, perhaps why I do the podcast, my background as a real estate investor, why I invest in real estate, and a sense for maybe what my big why is to a certain extent. Should you want to share this episode or listen to it again, you're welcome to do so, naturally. Otherwise, if you have the ability to leave us a review on your podcast PlayStation, that would be most appreciated. Share it with any real estate investment friends, frankly. And we will see you next week on the Landlording for Life podcast. Until then, keep landlording, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode. If you like what you heard, leave us a 5-star review and join our Facebook group to share your deals and ideas by searching at Landlording for Life. See you next time.